So with that, I'll just start to kind of dive in a little bit to the tech. I think the ask was, hey, tell us a little bit more about how PRYSM IO works and the technology behind it. So you guys are hopefully all familiar with S3, the biophotonic scanner. And I'm sure you've heard this story before, right? But the ask was, hey, the S3, it's really big, it's really expensive. How can we get it to be more portable? We wanted to get it into more hands from people globally across the world, right? S3 was great, but it was pretty limited in terms of having people have access to it, right? The leasing and maintaining it. And so the task for the Nu Skin team was, how do we get this global? How do we get this to a broader audience? And so in tandem with working with local professors, our engineering team, Dr. Joe Chang, our scientists, right, Steve, we were able to come up with a new technology that would measure antioxidants like S3, right, but in a more economic and compact format. So I'll tell you a little bit about how we were able to do that and what the technology is that's actually running inside of the device. The technology that's in it is exclusive to Nu Skin. We do have 2 patents that are pending on the PRYSM IO device. One is for the design, how the device looks and feels, the shape of it. And then the second patent that is pending is on the technology, which we'll talk about. A lot of people ask, what makes this unique to Nu Skin? How is this different from other devices that may be in the marketplace that do something similar? And our answer is, we have the data and the expertise of using Raman technology. And we've been scanning people for the last 20 years. Well, you guys have been scanning people for the last 20 years, and we've been collecting over 21 million scans. And then because we've had this data, because we've been able to tie what the antioxidant score and maybe lifestyle and data metrics, we've been able to bridge that gap to see how factors outside of just, diet, lifestyle, right, supplementing impact your score. And so bringing all that rich data in, I loved how Joe Chang talked about it at Greece, for those who were there. And he says, AI is useless without data, right? And so we have the data over the last 20 years that we've been collecting, right? You can't create a model off of nothing, right? And so as we've been collecting that data, we've been able to learn from it, and it's made this technology actually possible. We've been able to reduce the scan time, right, from over a minute years ago, right, to then 30 seconds to now 15 seconds, making it, again, super easy to do. It's not a long commitment, right? You just say, hey, do you want to know, what your nutritional status is, right? Just takes 15 seconds. Go ahead and put your finger on it. Super easy conversation starter. Really easy to transport, fit in your pocket. You don't need to lug around S3 anymore, which is exciting. And then our goal with PRYSM as well is just sharing, right? We want to get this out there. We want more people to scan. We want more people to know about it. We have such rich knowledge and solutions that we want to be able to bring those to everyone and not be limited in that way. So my favorite part is, let's talk a little bit about how the actual tech inside of the device works. So with PRYSM IO, we call the technology that powers it spectral ray. And spectral ray is made up of 3 different parts in the technology. There's the hardware, what actually is running physically inside of the device, the components, the LEDs, the board, the photodiodes, right? That's all the hardware. But on top of the hardware, we have the software that actually powers it, that says, how fast should you flash the LEDs? What's the math equation in there? The brightness of the LEDs. That is all unique and proprietary to Nu Skin, right? And that is what's being powered by what we know from Raman and put into this AI machine learning model. And so I'll tell you a little bit about hyperspectral absorption in a second, but at a basic level, we're using LEDs and we're measuring the absorption of light from the finger back into the device to see the carotenoid concentration in your skin. But we take it to the next step, though, and we actually go and reference what we know about Raman technology. So from that 20 million scan database, we actually go and say, okay, what do we know? How do people scan on S3? And how can we convert what we know about S3 into the PRYSM device? And so to actually calibrate these devices, what we've done is we go and we scan on a PRYSM device, and then we had people scan on the S3. And then we basically told machine learning and said, hey, here's the data that's coming back from the PRYSM IO device, and here's what they scanned on S3. Come up with a math equation that actually will convert these two. And so that math has been set, that's in the device, and it's running on the software now. And so that's our unique proprietary equation that, again, sets us apart from other competitors out there, right? Because we have what we know about Raman. And then the fun thing I caught a little bit about what Stephen was mentioning is that because we are using AI and machine learning, right, a lot of our tech is now software related. And because it's software related, there's a huge opportunity for us to be able to continue to improve it. We can make changes to it. S3 was great, but we were very limited by the hardware, right? We built it in a way that would work, but then we sent it out. And if we wanted to make any modifications, right, that was all hardware. We needed to put in a different part. We needed to get it back and fix it. But the beauty of PRYSM IO is the way that we've built it with, again, great hardware, but not necessarily as complex or expensive. It's more flexible and it's powered mainly by software, right? And so we can make updates to it as people scan. We'll continue to improve our algorithm. We'll continue to learn from it. And those can all go onto the device via firmware updates, right? You don't need to send your device back and have us improve it. It can all just be done at home with the same device. And so there's really a lot of power here in how we've shifted this technology. And doing so actually allowed us to make it smaller though too, right? The S3, the optics block is probably about that big, right? And so getting that into a smaller form factor was very difficult with the technology and resources for Raman spectroscopy. But being able to utilize this spectral ray technology, we now have it in this small form factor. In fact, we could have made it probably smaller too. But our joke is, right, we don't want people to lose this device. We got to have it at least big enough that you can keep track of it. But there was a lot of thought and process that went into that to make this device flexible and have a huge opportunity to improve in the future. And so hyperspectral absorption, let's talk about it a bit because we get a lot of questions about, well, how is actually the light working in there? And so inside of the device, this is not drawn to scale. This is more illustrative, right? But picture this image inside of this device. So in here, we have two photodiodes. We have one on the top and one on the bottom. And then inside, we have 5 LEDs. Now, each color was picked through scientific research and what we know about how different biomarkers in the skin absorb light. And so we have two LEDs in there that are specifically meant to measure carotenoids in the skin, right? We know where carotenoids absorb on a light spectrum. And so those two LEDs were picked to measure carotenoids. Then we have 2 other LEDs that are actually used to look at things like melanin and hemoglobin, so the skin pigment, right, in the blood and the skin, because that could tend to interfere with your score, right? So we want to make sure that we're measuring those and we're factoring them out of your score to make sure that we are truly just looking at carotenoids. This technology, right, is, I would say, fairly common in terms of, right, you see light being used in the smartwatches, you know, in the pulse oximeters, everyone's using LED light. It's proven, it's backed, and it's studied. But again, what makes us unique is the LEDs that we have picked, right? Those are unique wavelengths that Nu Skin has decided to use. We also have a whole complex software in here that's powering these LEDs, how fast they flash, how long they flash, how often the photodiodes measure. That is all unique and proprietary to our technology. And so what's happening inside this device is these 5 LEDs are flashing super fast. We're measuring about 15,000 times per second. And so you can see it once you get prisms, you can see it just flashing super fast. And then what this is doing is as the lights flash up into the skin, we measure how bright the light is on the way up. And then we measure how bright the light is on the return back down. So that's why we have the 2 photodiodes. And that absorption, what the difference between the two is what we use to help calculate your score, right? Using our AI model. And so a lot of that a little bit of that light gets absorbed into your skin. And that small difference, we're talking numbers super, super small, like 0.0063, right? A really, really small number. But we're able to magnify that and to give you a more in-depth and, I would say, accurate score, because we then power and reference what we know about how Raman sees the scores. And so this is when you look inside of the device and you see those lights flashing, this is exactly what's happening. But what you don't see is, back on this slide, the software and the algorithms that are running inside of the device to actually power it. And again, that's our secret sauce there that makes us different from everyone else on the marketplace. Another question we get a lot too, oops, a little trigger happy. Oh, it is automatically advancing. 1 second. We'll just go out. We have backed and studied this PRYSM device, right? We get a lot of questions like, how does it compare to S3? Are we actually measuring the antioxidants in the skin? And the answer is yes. So this was a study that we did pretty early on, actually, in our development process. It was done with a prototype. But what we did is we got about 50 people and we had them take LifePak for 12 weeks. And we measured them at 4, 8, and 12. And looked at what their S3 score was and what their PRYSM score was. And so you can see here that at each time point, the increase is similar in terms of, at week 4, S3 increased, and at week 4, PRYSM increased, and so on with 8 and 12. But the interesting thing here, though, is you'll see it's not necessarily a 1-to-1 ratio, right? They're not going up exactly the same. And I think this is important just because you'll get a lot of questions, right? Like, oh, I scanned on S3 and I was 50,000, but then I measured on PRYSM and I was 49,000, right? Shouldn't it be exactly the same? And a lot of the times, yes, it will be actually quite accurate and very similar, but at the same time, there may be slight differences because we are using different technology. It was calibrated differently, and it's a different form factor and a way of using it, right? If you were to get different health measuring devices off of Amazon, right, the likelihood that they would give you the exact same measurement from each different brand, right, is probably small. But showing that the S3 and the PRYSM are both measuring carotenoids at similar time points and similar increases, right? This is really the power behind the story, that even though we moved to a different technology, what we have done with Raman and what we know about Raman, we are still funneling that into the PRYSM IO device for a similar experience and a similar tracking. And so I think this is important. And again, just as we talk about it, to help educate that, yes, we are using a new technology and a new way of measuring, but it is still clinically backed and proven to measure at the same time points and increase. One other question we get to just while we're talking about it is the previous SDS products, right? Will those still work for the PRYSM IO device? And the answer is yes, right? So everything that has been certified, Youth, G3, Beauty Focus, Collagen Plus, right? Those will all show and increase your score on PRYSM IO because we are measuring the antioxidants in the skin. And then lastly, I think this is really important, again, to drive home because we want to change the game, and you guys will change the game for how PRYSM IO is talked about and shared, is that we just want this to be so social friendly and super easy to share. And so the goal, the overarching strategy here with PRYSM, right, is we want to get people to scan, right? We mentioned that it's 15 seconds, it's non-committal, it does not take hardly any time. All you need to do is put your finger on the device. You'll get your score, and right, what a great conversation starter that is of, hey, oh, not looking so good, or wow, what are you doing? You have a high score, right? And then from there going forward, and we have solutions, right? We don't just leave it and say, oh, so sorry, you're in the red zone. Good luck, best of luck to you, right? We go and say, you know what? We have a whole portfolio of products that are proven and scientifically proven to increase your score, right? So that's where we can go ahead and focus on subscription, getting people to try the product, and then tracking, right? As you guys have already talked about, right? We're able to actually show proven benefits and results. We don't go and say, take this supplement, you'll probably feel something, maybe you won't, but it's working, right? No, we can actually show you that it is working. And then from there, right, it's not just a one-time, yeah, I took LifePak once, great experience, right? It's a continual process. This is a lifestyle change, right? And so from there, being able to continue to foster those customer relations, continue them on their journey. I think one thing that's great that's Ryan's talked about before, and I think it's super key, is we're here to also educate and to help people learn about how to have a healthier lifestyle, right? We're not just giving you a score and saying, take this product. No, we want to educate. We want to actually help change lives. And so that will be a huge focus in the app as well, is learning about your score, learning how you can make those lifestyle and diet changes. And then in addition, supplementing helps kind of to bridge that gap as well. But it won't just be changed just by supplements, right? This is a lifestyle change. But again, we're really excited about this device, and it's already been so fun to see the momentum and energy that have been built, even with just such limited information and with prototypes, right? Really early devices in development, but just seeing the energy grow and how you guys are talking about it. So I can't wait for when we actually launch and see where this product goes. So with that, I don't know what's left on the agenda, but if there's questions, happy to answer, or if Steve or anyone has any comments.
I think that was awesome. It's just, as you can tell, the excitement's already there for it. And so the more that we learn behind the device, how you're developing it and how you're building it and rolling it out and the science behind it, the more that we can learn about that is just valuable for us. So thank you so much for getting on. I have one question. When we think about accuracy, what's our best avenue when we're talking about that to customers?
In terms of, can you clarify just accuracy comparing S3 to PRYSM, or accuracy like consistency over time, all the above?
All the above.
Okay. Yeah, so I think the PRYSM devices, like I mentioned, they're super early on in development, but we're already seeing really great results. But one thing that I think is important, S3, because it was leased and because we didn't have a ton of them around, people weren't used to scanning daily, right? It was very much I'm going to scan every few weeks, maybe every few months or a couple times a year, right? So they didn't have that back to back scanning experience. So one thing that I'm excited about with PRISM is we'll have these devices in people's hands and people will be scanning more often. Because of that, you may see some fluctuations, but we actually believe that that's fluctuations in how your body fluctuates too, right? Our body is constantly changing. When we talk about all the factors that impact, stress, your diet, right, traveling, things like that, that all changes on the daily. And so I think that's something we should start talking about and educating too, that your body changes, right? Everything's different. But again, the perception with S3 was it didn't, because we didn't measure as often, right? We were just scanning every 6 months. And so I think from that narrative, it's important to talk about how you may see changes, but it is accurate. We've done blood serum carotenoid studies. So we actually drew blood, measured on the PRISM device, right, and compared. Those studies should be published hopefully in the next month or so, but we have lots of clinical studies also coming. And so from a science perspective, we do have that backing. We have it proven. But I think from a customer knowledge, right, changing that narrative in terms of, yep, your body changes, and so will your score, I think will be important. And I'm also excited because we'll be grabbing more data too as people scan, right? AI, we're powered by data. So the more scans we get, the more data we get, we can start to hone in that too and maybe learn more things than we did with S3, right? Because we have more data coming through.
Perfect.